So welcome everybody to Macklin's Take. Me, Andy Clark, Matt Macklin, joining you the morning after the night before for a recap of the Whyte Povetkin card from Gibraltar. And it was a good night, Matt. It was a good night. Very, very good entertainment all round. We'll start with the main event, of course. And everybody was wondering, would it be repeat or revenge after what happened at Fight Camp in August? As it turned out, it was revenge. And you have to say it was a very good performance from Dillian White. People have been saying in the aftermath that Povetkin looked every one of his 41 years and that possibly his contracting COVID had taken a bit too much out of him. And it's reasonable that people will assess both fighters' performances. But I think in this instance, in any instance, the first thing you have to do is you have to give credit to the winner. And he looked good last night. And I thought he looked in great physical shape too.
Yeah, well, as soon as the weigh-in pictures, we seen him over in Gibraltar there getting on the scales. He looked in good shape. You know, he came in lighter. I think was it 4 or 5 pounds lighter than what he had been in the previous fight. I thought Dillian would win. I thought he'd probably win by stoppage late on. I thought he'd be not gun shy, but apprehensive and cagey early on. And thought he'd look to soften Povetkin up and slowly break him down over the rounds, but that's not what happened. I mean, he nailed him with a good right hand early on in the first round, and like all hell broke loose. He just, there were big haymakers being thrown, and I was thinking to myself, oh no, don't get into a shootout, because anyone can land in a shootout. So I was like, but look, from a fan point of view, we're watching it. We're excited because it's edge of your seat stuff, isn't it? You got two big guys there throwing bombs, and you're thinking, "Wow, one of these is going to land." Then he settled down a little bit, and he was boxing well. His lead right hands were working very well. His jab was good. And when he did get the finish, he really he put the punches together well.
I thought Povetkin did well, to be honest, to stay in there as long as he did, because he took some big shots in that third round too. With regard to him, I found the first round interesting because he didn't look steady. His legs didn't look strong. And although Dillian aimed some big punches, not too many of them really got through. And at that point, I did wonder whether Povetkin's punch resistance was maybe not there anymore, because, as I say, he didn't look steady and stable. But then he did eat up some heavy artillery, particularly a right hand in the third round. And after that, I thought to myself, okay, well, maybe it was just a balance issue in that first round, because he took a huge right hand. Personally, I don't think I really want to see Povetkin in the ring again. I think he's done enough. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, look. I think what happened was, I think he got nailed with a short right hand, which hurt him in the first round. Then Dillian jumped on him, threw some haymakers, which didn't necessarily land, but perhaps the forearm clipped the top of the head. And because he hadn't fully recovered from the straight right hand, his balance wasn't solid. So even those shots that were missing and the physical pushing and pulling was kind of throwing his equilibrium all over the place. So he did look unsteady. But he did take some big shots after that. So there's nothing wrong with his whiskers. But yeah, I think, look, we've seen at 41 years old, having won a world title, Povetkin's got nothing left to prove. I think he's done now. He's obviously not the fighter he was. But look, he's still dangerous, like he showed in the first fight. I mean, in the first fight, I thought he looked done. I thought Dillian he's done it. Dillian's softened him up, beaten him up. Yeah, he pulled that uppercut out of the bag. So I think, I just think at 41 years old, what have you got left to prove? He's had a fantastic career, great fighter. And I think that was the worst of his defeats. That was the worst. He got knocked out, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. And as I said at the start, you always give the credit to the winner. You have to give the credit to the winner, and he deserves credit, White, because really of the way he did it, as you say, he wasn't gun shy. He was bold, and even in that fourth round where he got him going, he could have been thinking to himself, "I've been here before. Let's not be." Let's maybe be a little bit more cautious, but he didn't. You could see that what happened in that first fight, he always insisted right from the second he peeled himself off the canvas, really. He always insisted that wouldn't affect him going forward. And we kind of scratch our heads and think, really, when something like that has happened. But he showed how strong he is mentally, because he proved that, didn't he? That he didn't let that get in his head.
What I love about Dillian and what I admire and respect about him more than anything is he's a gambler. You know, he's a risk taker. He backs himself. You know, he's not. We can all talk the talk, but he walks the walk. That doesn't mean he's going to win every single fight, that is invincible. It just means that he's prepared to back up what he says. He's prepared to roll the dice. You know, he says he believes in himself, and I'm going to prove it. I'm going to step into the plate. You know, boxing, especially at that level, once you get to top level, it's a 2-horse race. So, I mean, you know, you've a 50% chance of losing. Yet, believing in yourself means, well, I'm going to back myself every time. And that's what Dillian does. You know, even when he fought Joshua the first, you know, when they fought that time, you know, he was out of his depth, really. But the bottle he showed in that fight, you know, there's levels. Every fighter that gets in the ring's got bottle. And then there's degrees of bottle after that. But staying in there when you know you're out of your depth and you've been hurt and you're probably going to get KO'd, but stay in there to get KO'd, because I'm a proud man and I'm not going to quit. That's bottle. You know, that's you know, and Dillian had that bottle against Joshua. He was out of his depth. He was coming off second best. He'd been hurt. His legs were very unsteady. Yet he kept trying to win. You know what I mean? Dillian White's game as they come. And that's what I love about him. You know what I mean? He rolls the dice. He backs himself. He said he wasn't going to be gunshot, and he wasn't. From the first round, he nailed him and he went for it. And then, like you say, even in the fourth, when, yeah, he looked on Povetkin, but he looked on in last August, and he got caught. So, you know, he could have been more apprehensive and a bit more cagey and softened him up a bit more, but he didn't. He went for it. But I think that's why the public love Dillian. He's exciting. You know, yeah, he takes risks. He takes risks, but look, Lennox Lewis, as great as he was, and he was great, and I appreciate Lennox Lewis way more now than I did when he was fighting. I thought sometimes he was a little bit safety first, but maybe, you know, some people would argue that was what you should be. But I like the risk takers, and that's just a personal thing. But I like the fact that Dillian rolls the dice. I love it. I do. I think it's exciting.
No doubt, it is. I mean, it's a great ride we've been on with him, and long may it continue. As for what will be next for him, Eddie was talking after the fight last night, Eddie Hearn, about hopefully the WBC would reinstate him as mandatory. They could do that. I don't think they will, because they seem to have moved on from that situation. Dillian was down to 6 in the rankings. Deontay Wilder's at number 1. Dillian's been talking himself about maybe fighting the WBA regular champion Trevor Bryan. I understand why he wants to do that. And you couldn't really argue that he would maybe deserve to have a nominal world title fight, if you like. But personally, I don't really have any interest in that, and I don't think anybody else would either. I would love to see him fight. Here we are pushing him into yet another really hard fight. I would love to see him fight Deontay Wilder, because I think that could be such an interesting fight, because you just talked about Dillian's mindset there, whereby none of you lads will ever accept really that you're going to lose, but you all know really that it's an occupational hazard. It's probably in the post. And we talked about this to Damien Hughes on the podcast, which will be out on Tuesday. And what Damien said was that athletes who build their whole aura and self-definition around the fact that they've never been beaten and they're invincible, that's dangerous, because when you do lose, then what do you do? And I think that's Wilder. I think that defeat against Fury has damaged him, but that he will box again. And I think Dillian White could beat him.
I mean, there's no doubt that mentally, Deontay Wilder has unravelled since that Fury defeat. He has, you know, he sacked Mark Breland, the gloves. It's been one thing after another, hasn't it? As I've said before, the only way you can improve on what happened is by accepting what happened and then looking at how you can improve on that. But if you're in denial about what happened, how can you improve on it? Because you haven't accepted it. It's as if it didn't happen. Well, then how can you make the necessary adjustments? I don't know where Deontay Wilder goes or how he's going to come back, but I know Dillian has proven himself to be one of the top heavyweights in the world, and he definitely deserves a crack at the world title, whichever way that comes. I suppose from Dillian's point of view, the problem with the WBC interim mandatory situation is, if I was Dillian, I just wouldn't trust them. You know, that's how, you know, if I think I'm going to get my shot, how can he rely on them? You know, if he was IBF mandatory, then he knows he's going to get his shot. So that's, I suppose that's the situation Dillian finds himself in. I don't know. Look, I think what'll happen, he'll obviously sit down with his team. They'll speak with Eddie. And I think Eddie will just hit him with a few options, you know what I mean? And then it's up to them which one they take, really. There was talk that he might fight in the US in the summer, which would be good, I think, in a meaningful fight, build his profile there. Not that, you know, everyone knows who Dillian White is, but, you know, just to the casuals in the US, the box there would definitely enhance his reputation and profile. And then possibly maybe Wilder is the fight after that. You know, it's a fight Dillian was calling for a long time. Obviously, probably the shine's gone off it now because he doesn't have the WBC title, and obviously Fury dismantled him and stopped him the way he did. But it's still a big fight.
It is. It'd be huge. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Wilder, I still think has got plenty to offer, but I make you totally right there. It's key that when you do lose, that you have to accept that it's happened and work out why it's happened so as to best prevent it from happening again. Refusal to accept it is not the mindset of a
the first
delusion. It's delusional, basically.
Yeah, the first step in getting over a problem is accepting that there is one. Then when you've accepted there's a problem, now I can look for the solution. But if I'm in denial that I've even got a problem, I've got absolutely zero chance of doing anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. But just to reiterate, I do want to see Wilder back. I think he's added a lot to boxing over the last few years, and it would be great to see him back on the scene and really firing and there because he wants to be there and because he has cleared his head and he's in a good place. So let's just have a quick word about the rest of the card. We had a good win for Fabio Wardley against Eric Molina. Molina was kind of what we thought, really. He gave it a bit of a go at times and then went down and stayed down without really looking like he was too interested in getting back up. But it's a good win for Fabio. It's a big win for Fabio. It was a good match as it turned out. The matchmakers got that absolutely right. Cheeseman against Metcalf. We need to have a quick conversation about that. What we were talking about before the fight was we were trying to work out whether the fact that Cheeseman had been in some hard fights was going to be a positive or whether Metcalf's freshness would maybe be the positive. Yeah. It was that kind of a battle. In the end, it turned out that Cheeseman's experience really was what won him the fight because I had it 5-3 Cheeseman through 8. I think you might have had it 4-4. But then in the 9th, after losing 2 or 3 rounds, he upped the tempo, Ted Cheeseman. He took control of the fight and he knocked Metcalf out.
Yeah, I think I had it 5-4 after 9. Look, it's one of them, isn't it? You've got and it's a fine line and everyone's different. Every individual's different, you know, miles on the clock or experience, you know. So in order to have experience, there's going to be some miles on the clock. But is it so much miles on the clock that you're shot worn? You know, are you battle hardened or are you shot worn? And that's not always an easy line to draw. And, you know, they're guesstimates. We're here and we're thinking, we're guessing it a little bit. But, you know, Cheeseman had 4 or 5 hard fights, but he's only 25. And again, it's different. You see some fighters down through history that have had unbelievable wars for so many years. And you see them now and they're old men and they've got all their faculties. You know what I mean? And you've got other guys that had they had a few brutal fights, but it was short term in comparison, like massively in comparison. And, you know, they're not in good shape now. You know, they were shot fairly quickly after a few really brutal fights. And actually now in later life, they're not in great shape. And like you say, I mean, I met Carmen Basilio once at a boxing writers thing in America. You wouldn't think that man had any hard fights. You know, he's as fresh as a daisy.
Wow, he's
15-round wars.
Oh, what a legend! What a legend! Beat Ray Robinson and then lost the rematch. But world middleweight champion in the 50s. Really good book about him actually called The Onion Picker. In case anybody's interested.
Yeah. And you know, there's Jake LaMotta. Another one, the amount of wars he had, in good shape. And then, you know, I've met other guys, I won't say who they are, but I've met other guys out in America around different gyms and that, and they're not in good shape. And you wouldn't have thought, you would expect it to be the other way around. You'd have expected Jake LaMotta, Carmen Basilio to be badly affected from boxing, but actually they're not. And these guys that You know, you wouldn't have thought, yeah, they had some tough fights, don't get me wrong, but you wouldn't have expected the damage that they're in now. So everyone's different, you know what I mean? And Cheeseman, you're trying to gauge it. You think, well, look, he's 25 years old, so he's only young. He hasn't had loads of fights, but these last 4 or 5 fights, these last couple of years have been tough. He's had to go to the well. Not even if he's shot physically, but is he mentally, emotionally? Is he, you know, is the hunger still there? Is it starting to become a bit hard for him? Does he really want it anymore? You know, how what ambition is there? You know, he's only 25, so you'd imagine there's loads, but after it being so tough over 2 years, it might have just knocked the appetite out of him a little bit. Obviously, that wasn't the case. As it played out and transpired, it was battle hardened. His experience, that extra seasoning, the fact that he had been there before, meant he knew when to go. Like, for example, I think it was the 4th round he had Metcalf. No, Metcalf hurt him. Was it? Yeah, Metcalf hurt him and went for it. Whichever. And
it was the 4th round that Cheeseman really hurt Metcalf. Then I think it was the 6th that Metcalf got to Cheeseman a little bit.
Sorry, that's it. Sorry, the 4th round Cheeseman hurt Metcalf, and he went for it a bit, but then he realised Metcalf was fighting back, so he eased off. You know, and that was experience. Now, he could have gone for it and really put his foot to the floor and expended loads of energy, not got him out of there, and then paid the price. You know, shot his bolt, so to speak. You know what I mean? Where he didn't, and that was experience. He did go for it, realised he wasn't quite ready, eased back, and then paced it and stepped back on further down the line. And that's experience. That's being that battle hard and being there. You know what to expect. You know when to go. You know when to rest. You know when to pull back. And that. I think that was what won him the fight: the experience and the seasoning.
Metcalf can come again, definitely. You know, he was 21-0. He hadn't been in as deep as Cheeseman, and you know, it'll take a little while to recover from this physically for him, and he's got to learn the lessons from that first defeat. But I think he can do that and get right back in that mix. Eddie Hearn was saying after the fight that the fight he wants to make is Cheeseman against Fowler, and I mean, it's an easy fight to make because they're both matchroom fighters, and it's a really good fight too. Whether it's in London in front of a very pro Cheeseman crowd or in Liverpool in front of a very pro Fowler crowd, you'd imagine it'll be London because Cheeseman's the champion. Why would he go to Liverpool if he doesn't have to? But wherever it is, sign me up for that.
Yeah, but you know what? It's another blood and guts fight, isn't it? It's another fight that you can't see being anything but excruciatingly tough. You know, and like, you know, your Tony Sims looking after Cheeseman. Oh, do you really want that fight next after the back of that? You know, and after the back of the run he's had, I'm not sure. You know, if Metcalf comes back with a win, an impressive win, him and Fowler, I'd love to see that in Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be good. That would really work. Yeah, it's a good point you make there. Actually, Cheeseman is fantastic to watch, and Eddie Hearn said exactly the same. And Cheeseman joked in the post-fight interview that he would remember that when they next came to negotiate. But when you've got someone who's a crowd pleaser, the temptation, if you're a promoter, of course, is to wheel them out as often as you feasibly can in a tough fight. And that might be great for you, but it won't necessarily be what's best for them. And Tony Sims, of course, it's his job to look out for what is best for Cheeseman. So we'll wait and see what happens with that one. And with regard to the rest of the card, we saw a really good win for Michael McKinson against Chris Kongo. It was an interesting fight, that, because McKinson, they're both technically very good fighters. We thought it might be quite cagey early on, but early on, McKinson, he did what I don't think Kongo thought he would do. He employed a kind of tactic which I've never really seen him employ before, where he sprang in from range, technically speaking, doing everything wrong, got on top of Kongo, let his hands go, square tall, everything was wrong. And then he got out. And he won 2 or 3 rounds and got a knockdown doing that, then kind of reverted to type, and Kongo couldn't catch him. I found it a real kind of absorbing fight to watch.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. It wasn't a you know, a war of attrition, or it wasn't going to be a fight of the year candidate like the Cheeseman Fowler, but it was very absorbing, very yeah, it was an interesting fight. You know, it was more of a purist, but that would enjoy it. It was a chess match, a lot of it. But early on, McKinson was aggressive, and I think Kongo struggled with the speed of McKinson early on, and he couldn't get the range with him. You know, McKinson was way out. He was out of range, and then he come really quickly. He closed the distance, but he was doing it really quickly. And even technically speaking, you wouldn't really teach someone to do it the way he was doing it, because he was kind of lunging a little bit. But because of his speed, he was getting away with it. And Congo couldn't get Congo, who's well schooled and technically does what you're supposed to do, struggled with it a little bit, I thought. And it took him a few rounds to one, for him to kind of get used to it and get the timing to adapt, which he did. But also McKinson, kind of having had that success then and kind of got his nose in front, then kind of settled into the role of counter punching a little bit as well, was happy to protect his lead. But it was an interesting fight, but I think without a doubt the right man won.
Agreed. I thought your scorecard was basically the same as in John Lewis's, and the two other judges had it slightly tighter. I think you had it 97-94, and I thought that was right, because after the start that McKinson had, for Congo to get a draw or better, he pretty much had to win every other round. I just thought that game plan early on from McKinson was really clever. Campbell Hatton had a debut, and he got a good 4 rounds in. It's a softly with Campbell. It has to be. People will be tempted to try and put him into big fights in probably his next fight because of his surname. But the team around him, they know exactly how this needs to be done. Eddie Hearn was talking about him boxing 7-8 times in his first year as a pro. By the end of 2 years, they'll maybe want him kind of 10, 12 fights in. And he's got to take it. He's got to take it slowly, because he's a raw novice pro, just the same as any raw novice pro would be who isn't called Hatton.
Look, exactly, and what the thing is, because he is Hatton, like kind of Ben, like Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., like anyone, whose brother or father had great careers, there's scrutiny, there's spotlight, there's a lot of negative naysayers, people looking to compare. Let the kid walk his own journey. Do you know what I mean? It's like, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., his old man, maybe the best Mexican fighter of all time, certainly one of them. And, he ended up having a good career. Chavez Jr., world champion, fought some really good fighters, beat some really good fighters. And it took him a while to develop. When he turned pro first, he was skinny. He was, he wasn't experienced. So he was learning on the job. Now, because of the pulling power of Hatton and his, it affords the son the opportunity to be built slowly. So from that point, it's a positive. The negative, because everyone's looking to knock you and compare you and judge you on every performance to a level that they shouldn't, because it's the comparisons they make. So there's a positive and a negative, and I suppose you just have to ignore the criticism and just listen to your team and have patience and faith with the way you do things.
That's it. That's the only way, isn't it? In that kind of scenario. On Facebook, we saw a good win for Yusuf Kamari against Kane Baker. Kamari was impressive, I thought. A new member of Team Whyte. His first fight with Dillian as his manager. Anyway, definite possibilities for him. Let's just finish off, though, with a chat about the opening fight on the pay-per-view coverage, which was Eric Pfeiffer, who's another new member of Team Whyte, a double Olympian, London 2012, Rio 2016, a 2-time World Amateur Championship bronze medalist, and that's a very hard thing to do. 7-0, 5 knockouts. Hadn't really boxed anyone, no, up until last night, but the belief was that he could move quick. 9-2 in WSB, including 2 wins against Tony Yoka. So that is a rich amateur background. Up against Nick Webb, who we saw beaten by David Allen. Later that year, he was beaten by Kamil Sokolowski and then relaunched with a win in Ultimate Boxer. I thought this was going to be a very tough night for Nick Webb, quite honestly. But what a performance he produced. In that first round, you could see him sting Pfeiffer. He didn't really hurt him badly, but you could just see on Pfeiffer's face, he was just thinking, oh, hang on a second, I wasn't really expecting that. And he just never let him off the hook, Nick Webb, and stopped him in the second round. It was an absolutely massive win.
I'm glad you mentioned this one, because on a big card like that, it's easy to forget that. And it was probably, it might have been performance of the night, by the Cheeseman one, you could have said, and look, Dillian obviously, got revenge in that, but it was one of the performances of the night. He was definitely Look, you've got a 7-0 undefeated former Olympian, and as you say, he's 34. Was he 34 years old? 9-2 in the WSB. So listen, he's already had 11 pro fights. That's what they are. 5 threes against, and these aren't journeymen. These are other top fighters. So when you had that kind of experience as an amateur, you move quicker. You move quickly, and because of his age, you have to. So this Webb was obviously meant to give him a challenge. It'd be a learning fight for him, but he was definitely meant to beat him. And if you're the matchmaker, you'd think, well, like this guy, he's 2-time Olympian, world bronze medalist twice, 7-0. So he's done some rounds. Yeah, this guy's got a good record, but he only stepped up. Dave Allen beat him, the other guy beat him. So you're thinking it's a safe match, really. What a learning fight, but a safe match. But fucking hell, Webb just jumped at him, didn't he? First round, he just came out and he obviously didn't read the script. He had his own ambitions and his own game plan. And he jumped out, he was aggressive. I think he definitely clipped him early on, which I think buzzed him. And then his confidence grew and he just jumped on him after that. And he really, you know what? He wasn't half planting his feet. He was bombing those shots in. He was like really digging him in. He was backing him up behind a double jab. He took the center of the ring. He bossed it, and you feel sorry for Pfeiffer, but you gotta smile and be happy for Webb.
Absolutely. With Scott Welch in his corner, those two have known each other a while. I think Scott managed him at the start of his career, and now he's back training him too. And the celebrations at the end were wild because they know what this means for his career. That puts him right back in the mix at kind of domestic level. Joe George, you'd imagine, will vacate that British. Then you've got Fabio Wardley, Nathan Gorman, fighters like that. Nick Webb now he's got a new lease of life, and it's great to see someone upset the odds like that. So it was a good night. It was a really, really enjoyable night of boxing, and it was certainly different in the setting of Gibraltar with a noisy crowd. There were 502, I think, in there in general. Between them, I think they might have drunk about 5,002 pints because they were definitely getting into it. But I think that's exactly what should happen. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be back on Macklin's Take with our audio podcast on Tuesday with Damien Hughes of the High Performance podcast. He does that with Jake Humphrey, and we look at high performance in boxing and mentality and mindset. And he had some very, very interesting things to say. And that will appear on YouTube on Thursday. That's how we'll do it from now on. The audio podcast will go up on iTunes and everywhere else on Tuesday as normal, or kind of late Monday night, and then appear on YouTube on Thursday.
I'm just going to say 2 words to preview the podcast on Tuesday. Peak idiot.
Peak idiot. He's got some great kind of phrasing, Damien, to explain things, to explain certain scenarios. And peak idiot is great. You'll very much enjoy the Dunning-Kruger law as well, which basically dictates that stupid people are too stupid to work out why they're shit at things. That's one part of it. So have a listen to that. It's really good. Like, it's the guests that make our podcast. When we say, "Oh, it was a great podcast," we're not talking about us. We're talking about our guests. And Damien was someone a bit different, steeped in boxing because his old man's Brian Hughes, legendary trainer. So get some of that down to you this week, definitely. And we will catch up with you again on YouTube soon.